I hadn't seen my father in nearly 5 years, but when I stepped into the cold, sterile conference room at Greaves and Halford, the air thick with the smell of lemon polish and ambition, nothing felt different. His glare was the same a look that could freeze hell in an instant. It wasn't the kind of reception I had hoped for. But then again, I wasn't there for a reunion. No hugs, no inquiries about my last deployment or whether I'd come home in one piece. I had no intention of trying to belong to this family again. Grandpa Marshall had made it clear. I was here for him, not for them. At the head of the table sat my father, Leonard Greaves, wearing the kind of expression that could only belong to a CEO who'd been given bad news but was too proud to acknowledge it. My sister, Era, sat beside him, her legs crossed in that all-knowing, smug posture of someone who thought they had everything figured out. Miss Halford, the family lawyer, had been with us for years, back when they still pretended I was one of them. Rowan. Miss Halford's voice broke through the silence. Her words were clear, measured, detached. I'm sorry for your loss, but as your grandfather instructed, we'll proceed with the reading of the will. Her professional tone did little to soothe the ache in my chest. This wasn't a will reading to mate was a reckoning. The will unfolded in the same dry manner as the rest of their lives. Businesslike, transactional. To Aller Greaves, Grandpa's old hunting partner, went the family property at Evergreen Lake and the Steinway piano that had been in the family for generations. To Leonard Greaves, my father, went a set of first-edition Hemingway novels and a $10,000 donation made in his name to the American Ethics Council. My father snorted derisively at the donation. It wasn't much of a gift, but that's just how he liked things. Transactional, utilitarian. And then, Miss Halford flipped the page. To Rowan Greaves, my granddaughter, my only confidant, I leave the remainder of my estate. This includes all financial holdings, real estate, and voting control over Braden Tech Systems. Effective immediately. Era's smug smile faltered, but Leonard's face was a mask of fury. They hadn't expected this shell, neither had I. The flames of anger began to rise in my father's eyes, and without a word, he reached out and snatched the check from the table. The check was for $38,246,000 signed, dated, and clean. You think this brings you back? My father sneered, his voice thick with contempt. Before anyone could respond, Leonard pulled out a lighter and set the check on fire right there, in front of the lawyer, in front of Era. The paper curled in his hand, the flames dancing up the page like an insult to everything it represented. I didn't flinch. I didn't shout. I just smiled. It wasn't a smile of victory. Not exactly. More like the kind of smile you wear when you already know how the story ends, and you're just waiting for everyone else to catch up. Because what he burned wasn't what he thought it was. While Leonard's rage burned through the check, I sat back in my chair, unmoved. They didn't know about the second envelope, the one Grandpa had slipped into my coat pocket just a month before he died. The one he'd wrapped in a napkin, as if it were a sacred document. He'd told me, "Don't open this unless they try to burn it." Well, they had. So I did. But not right away. Not until I had to sit there, amidst their false grief and manufactured rage, listening to them accuse Miss Halford of forging the damn will, like she was some criminal mastermind. They were flailing, trying to claw back control of what they thought was still theirs. Era demanded a second reading. Leonard wanted an audit. And I just listened. Hands folded in my lap. As the room unraveled, they were panicking, trying to rewrite history as if burning a piece of paper could erase the truth. They didn't know me. They didn't know what I'd learned in Kandahar, how many nights I'd stayed invisible just to survive. They didn't know that Grandpa had trusted me with the truth, even when no one else could see it. They didn't know that when Grandpa told me, "You're the only one I trust to finish what I started," he wasn't talking about money. He was talking about legacy. So, when Leonard flicked the ashes of the check across the table and told me I was out, I didn't flinch. I smiled again because I already knew. I was the only one still in. Under the table, my fingers brushed against the second envelope in my coat pocket. I wasn't leaving empty-handed. They could argue, throw threats, and set the room on fire for all I cared. My job had already been done the moment I saw Era's face the look of disbelief, as she realized the empire she thought she inherited had slipped right through her French manicured fingers. I stood up slowly, walked out of the room without a word, and heard the steady click of my boots on the polished wood floor as I left them behind. Outside, the courthouse lot was half empty, just like I remembered it. The same cracked asphalt. The same leaning oak tree by the gate. I used to climb that tree when I was 8, before Leonard told me girls didn't belong in trees. That was the first time I thought maybe I didn't belong anywhere. The drive back to my apartment was silent, save for the hum of the engine. I didn't turn on the radio. My thoughts were too loud for distractions. The envelope, still in the passenger seat, was burning a hole in my mind. But I didn't open it. Not yet. Not until I was ready. Back in my apartment, I poured myself a glass of water, staring out the window at a street I didn't like, but never left. The weight of everything Grandpa's death, the inheritance, the fire, the silence was settling on me. I thought about my first deployment, the years I spent serving overseas. It was Thanksgiving when I came home, after nearly 18 months away. Syria. Convoy defense, border patrol. My friends bled out in the sand. But when I came home, Leonard didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't ask how I was doing. He simply said, "You didn't write." My room was gone. My childhood replaced with beige armchairs, a fake orchid, and a framed quote about calm waters and quiet minds. They had erased me. I thought about that moment, about how I'd felt so abandoned then. But now, I felt a quiet kind of peace. I wasn't leaving. Not this time. I was done being invisible. I sat in the kitchen, the envelope still unopened. Grandpa had trusted me with something more than money. And now, it was my turn to finish what he started. It took me a while to open the envelope. The weight of it was strange in my hands, like it knew something I didn't. I kept it on the counter for a few hours, trying to distract myself. But every time I glanced at it, my mind raced. What was inside? Why did Grandpa trust me with this? I knew there was no going back once I opened it. Finally, the silence in my apartment felt unbearable, and I couldn't delay anymore. I picked up the envelope, the red wax seal cracking under my thumb, and slid the paper out. There was no turning back now. What I found wasn't what I had expected, but then again, nothing with this family ever was. It was a single sheet of paper, printed neatly with legal language and dotted with signatures. Beneath the printed text was a USB drive, taped to the back of the page. I stared at it for a moment, wondering if I was ready for whatever was next. But Grandpa had given me a warning. Don't open this, unless they try to burn it. They had. I picked up the flash drive carefully, then plugged it into my computer, holding my breath as the device powered up. There was no password, no security. Just a single folder labeled Inheritance. Inside, I found what looked like bank documents, legal authorizations, company control transfers, and something that resembled a draft of a second will. My hands trembled slightly as I sifted through the digital files. This was the real inheritance. The part they hadn't been able to burn. My heart skipped a beat as I read through the legal authorizations. It was all there. The financial holdings, real estate, and voting control over Braden Tech. Grandpa had already processed it all, and the funds had been transferred long before I even stepped into that conference room. The check that Leonard had burned? It was just a decoy. I let out a shaky breath, leaning back in my chair as the gravity of it settled in. Grandpa had known they would try to erase me. He'd made sure the real documents were in place. This was more than money. It was control. And it was mine. But the relief I felt didn't last long. I opened the bank app to check the account details. The screen flickered, and then I got an error message. Account not found. I frowned, tried again, but the same thing happened. No account. This isn't happening, I thought. I dialed customer service, trying to steady my nerves as I waited for someone to pick up. A tired voice greeted me. "Dylan here. How can I help?" "Yeah," I said, my voice tight. "My account's saying I'm not in the system anymore. Can you check on that?" There was a long pause before he responded. "Sorry, Miss Greaves, but our records show your account is marked as inactive." I gritted my teeth. "What does that mean?" "It means deceased," he said, his voice hesitant. I didn't say anything for a moment, my heart sinking. "That's a mistake. I'm here, I'm alive." Another pause. "I'm sorry, but your status was certified by the registrar's office 2 weeks ago." I didn't wait for him to say more. I hung up before my voice cracked. My whole body felt like it had turned to stone. They had done it. They'd erased me from the system. Legally deceased. I could feel the anger building inside me, but it wasn't enough to shake the overwhelming realization. They had gone this far to wipe me out of existence, to steal everything Grandpa had left for me. They were trying to bury me, and now they had to face the consequences. I knew what I had to do. There was only one place I could go now. The DMV. It took an hour of waiting behind an old woman arguing about a parking ticket from 2006 before I finally got to the counter. When I handed over my ID, the clerk looked at the screen, then back at me, confused. "You're flagged as legally deceased," she said, her tone polite but blunt. "What?" I could barely get the words out. "I'm standing right here," she nodded sympathetically, but there was no denying it. "The system doesn't show that. You'll need to file a correction through Vital Records." "How long will that take?" I asked, my heart pounding in my chest. "Could be a few months," she replied. "Maybe longer. Depends on the case." I walked out of there before I could even think of throwing a punch. The world outside seemed to blur. My thoughts spinning. They want me to disappear. They want me dead. I stepped onto the sidewalk. But as I walked, something caught my eye. Across the street, beneath the bare trees, stood a woman. She was wearing oversized sunglasses, despite the gray sky, and a blue silk scarf wrapped around her neck. I didn't need to look twice to know who she was. It was my mother's scarf, the one she'd claimed the dry cleaners lost 3 years ago. The woman didn't wave. She didn't speak. She just stood there, watching me, like she had all the time in the world. I felt my pulse quicken. My breath hitched. Before I could make sense of it, I stepped into traffic, crossing slowly. When I reached the other side, she was gone. No trace. No footsteps. Like she had never been there at all. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been watching me. Someone who wasn't supposed to be there. Back at my apartment, I decided I couldn't wait any longer. The envelope had burned a hole in my pocket, and it was time to face the truth. I dug through the drawers in my closet and pulled out the stack of letters Grandpa had sent me over the years. He'd written to me even when no one else did. His handwriting was steady, even near the end. I had dozens of his letters, each one folded neatly and tucked inside books or drawers, hidden away like secrets. Among them, I found an old brass key, wrapped in a faded handkerchief. The tag read, "Langford, Box, 17. Grandpa had given it to me on my 18th birthday. "You'll need this someday," he had said. But at the time, I had no idea what he meant. I grabbed my hoodie, the key, and walked out the door. Langford Storage wasn't far, just a short drive through the quieter part of town. Old storefronts lined the streets, mailboxes sagging from years of neglect. I parked in front of a wine shop that hadn't opened since before the pandemic and made my way to a door wedged between a boarded-up bookstore and a long-abandoned store. No sign. Just a faded camera and a black buzzer. When I pressed it, the camera blinked red. A woman opened the door. Late 50s, her ponytail crisp and businesslike. No name tag, no smile. She didn't ask who I was. "You have the key?" she asked, eyeing me carefully. I handed it over. She checked her clipboard, nodded, and stepped aside to let me in. The hallway was narrow, the air cold, and lights buzzed above me like they hadn't been replaced in decades. We passed 6 steel doors before she stopped at one, typed in a code, and opened it. "Take your time," she said, then walked away, shutting the door behind her. Inside was a room of silence. The walls were concrete, the drawers cold and metallic. Box 17 was halfway down the row. I slid it open. Inside was a black, fireproof folder and a manila envelope. No dust, no smell. It had been waiting. I sat on the floor, trembling slightly as I opened the folder. A certified cashier's check lay inside $38,246,000. Same amount, same name, but this one had security features baked into the paper. It shimmered when I tilted it in the light. But the real shock came when I turned the check over and found a tiny red sticker, non-negotiable, copy burned. I stared at the sticker. That told me everything I needed to know. Grandpa had given me the real inheritance, and now I had the proof. The rest of it? It was just a game they played with fire. But the game wasn't over. The room felt colder as I sat on the floor, the weight of the envelope in my lap heavier than I had imagined. Grandpa's last gift to me, the real inheritance, wasn't about the money. It was never about the money. This was about control. It was about legacy. And it was about taking back what was mine from a family that had thought they could erase me without a second thought. I hadn't expected this much. A cashier's check, a sealed folder, a flash drive with everything I needed to take them down. But it still felt surreal. My brain kept telling me to breathe, to slow down, but my hands were already flipping through the papers, my eyes scanning them in a frantic attempt to absorb everything at once. The real funds, everything that had been quietly transferred into my name, were all their bank documents, legal filings, the transfer of power at Braden Tech. Grandpa had already made sure that all the financial control had shifted to me. But they didn't know. None of them knew. My father, Leonard, Era, they thought they could just get rid of me. They couldn't have been more wrong. The question now was simple. What next? I stared at the check again, its intricate watermark shimmering in the light of the dim apartment. A reminder that they couldn't erase this. They couldn't burn the truth. Not this time, but the truth was messy. It wasn't clean or easy. They were going to fight back, and when they did, they'd play dirty. I had to be ready for that. I had to be more than just ready. I had to make sure they would never see it coming. I put the check in the folder back into my bag, feeling the weight of it settle against my side. Then I went to my computer and logged into the secure online portal Grandpa had used for all his business dealings. His login information was stored in a file I hadn't yet opened, and I knew it was the key to unlocking everything else. I plugged in the flash drive. No password, just files. Deep legal documents that seemed to connect all the dots. There were transfers of stock, multiple accounts, and proof of a trust setup that bypassed the family. Grandpa had known that the family would never accept me as their heir, and he'd taken steps to make sure I would never need their approval. He'd built something stronger than any will. He'd built me a foundation. The legal documents on the flash drive outlined the humanitarian division of Braden Tech that Grandpa had been quietly developing for years. This wasn't just about taking down Leonard. This was about showing the world what kind of man he really was. The kind of man who would rather destroy his own blood than see them succeed. And all this while, Grandpa had quietly set up the perfect foundation for me to take control without their interference. He'd made sure I would have the power, but the truth had to be documented, verified. There had to be proof. It wasn't just about getting control, it was about dismantling their hold on everything. If I was going to make my move, I needed the evidence to be airtight. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of what lay ahead. The legal battle would be relentless. Sylvia had been right. I had to stay quiet. Let them think I was stunned. Let them think they'd won, just a little longer. I sat back, closed my eyes, and let the silence in the apartment wash over me for a moment. Then, I pulled out my phone and called the only person I could trust to help me through this, Sylvia Marsh. The phone rang 3 times before Sylvia picked up. "Rowan?" Her voice was sharp, always cutting through the fog of confusion. "What's happened?" "They did it," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "They tried to erase me, declared me dead, canceled my accounts. But Grandpa left me everything." Sylvia was quiet for a moment. "I told you," she said. "I told you they'd try." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "I have it all. The documents, the control, the proof. They thought they could burn me out of existence, but they didn't realize I was already ahead." She exhaled on the other end of the line. "Okay. Good. You need to move fast, Rowan. You've got the evidence, but now we need to get to the next step. I'll help you get it all verified, but you're going to need to stay calm. If you make one wrong move, they'll hit back harder." "I know," I said, my voice low. "I won't make any more mistakes." She was silent again, then said, "I'll need access to your military records. The VA files, discharge papers, deployment orders, anything signed. If we can tie their forged documents to your real signature, we've got them. But we need to act fast." "I'll get it," I replied, already reaching for the box that contained my military records. "I'll send it over to you tonight." "That's good," Sylvia said. "We'll need the court documents too. Your signature on the family trust agreement. We'll use the audits, the stock transfers, all of it. This isn't just a family squabble. It's wire fraud, document fraud, and conspiracy." I paused, the weight of her words hitting me. This wasn't just about proving I was alive. This was about everything. I had to be prepared for what was coming. "Okay," I said, my resolve hardening. "We'll hit them hard. No more games." Sylvia gave a short, grim chuckle. "That's what I like to hear." "Don't worry, Rowan. They don't know what's coming." The next few days blurred together as I gathered everything I needed. I took my military records to Sylvia's office, along with the documents Grandpa had left me. Together, we organized them, cross-referencing everything to make sure there were no holes. Sylvia was meticulous, checking every detail, every date. Meanwhile, Miles, the forensic document analyst, got to work on matching signatures and proving the forgery. He worked fast, scanning the documents under UV light, running them through digital comparison software. Every time he found something new, I felt my anger rise. The more we uncovered, the more I realized how deep their manipulation had gone. And then it hit me. I hadn't expected it to be this calculated, this thorough. They'd thought they had me cornered, but they'd underestimated the fire in me. They hadn't counted on me coming back, and they hadn't counted on Grandpa's legacy being bigger than any of them. I looked down at the stack of papers in front of me, the forged documents, the legal filings, the signatures, and felt the rush of adrenaline surge in my veins. This wasn't just about getting what was mine. This was about setting the world straight. Sylvia had already filed an emergency injunction with the court to freeze Braden Tech's board actions, but that wouldn't stick unless we presented it in front of a judge. We needed to show the world that Leonard Greaves wasn't just a schemer. He was a fraud. And I was going to make sure everyone knew it. But there was one more piece I needed: the press. I stared out the window of Sylvia's office. The skyline of the city stretched before me like a field of glass and steel. Everything outside looked so normal, so predictable, and I couldn't help but wonder how many people in this city went about their day without even a hint of the chaos that was about to unfold. I wasn't one of them. I knew exactly what was coming, and I'd prepared for it. Sylvia and Miles had worked tirelessly behind the scenes to line up every document, every detail, and I'd taken the time to make sure that everything I had was bulletproof. No loopholes, no missteps. Yet even with all this preparation, something still gnawed at mean instinct, deep in my gut, that told me this wouldn't go down like I planned. I knew my family, knew how they'd react when they found out they couldn't erase me from the picture. They wouldn't go down quietly. My phone buzzed, pulling me from my thoughts. It was Sylvia. "You ready?" she asked. Her voice steady, as if she were preparing to storm a battlefield. "I think so," I replied. I glanced at the papers spread across the desk in front of me. Everything was in place. The court filings, the signatures, the proof of the forgery. Leonard and Era wouldn't know what hit them. But that didn't make me feel any better. In fact, it made the tension in my chest grow tighter. Good. The hearing's in 2 hours, Sylvia said, a tone of finality in her voice. Miles has everything ready. The moment you walk into that courtroom, everything changes. You've been patient enough. Now it's time to make them pay. I hung up, running my fingers across the edges of the papers. The weight of it all was immense. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. That maybe, just maybe, this wasn't going to be as simple as I'd hoped. The courtroom was cold, sterile. The walls echoed with the shuffle of feet and the murmur of voices as the judge's gavel struck the wooden surface, signaling the start of the hearing. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, but I stayed calm, my expression blank as I stepped forward and sat at the table with Sylvia. Across from us, Leonard and Era sat with their lawyers, their faces set in grim determination. Leonard was wearing that smug look he always did, the one that said, "I'm in control," but I could see the flicker of doubt in his eyes. He was holding it together, but just barely. Sylvia leaned toward me, her voice low but fierce. "Just remember what we talked about. No theatrics. Let the evidence speak for itself." I nodded, taking a deep breath. I was ready for this. I had to be. My life was on the line, and everything I had worked for, the legacy Grandpa had given me, was now sitting in the hands of a judge who would decide whether or not I could take back what was rightfully mine. The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Rena Kinley, called the hearing to order. She was an older woman, sharp-eyed and authoritative. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. The case was straightforward enough. Contesting the fraudulent death certificate and proving the forgery of my signature on the documents that had been used to steal my inheritance. The first part of the hearing was predictable. Leonard's lawyer, a smooth-talking corporate shill named Benson Price, took the stand and tried to convince the judge that this was all a misunderstanding. He claimed that everything had been done according to family protocol, and that I had abandoned my role in the family business, leaving them no choice but to take control. His words were designed to sow confusion, but I wasn't fooled, not for a second. Sylvia stood up next, her voice cutting through the room like a knife. "Your Honor, we are here today to contest the suppression of Rowan Greaves's legal identity and the fraudulent execution of financial documents related to her grandfather's estate. This is not just a matter of inheritance, this is a matter of justice." The judge nodded, giving Sylvia permission to continue. Sylvia was a force to be reckoned with. She was quick, direct, and methodical. She laid out the evidence piece by piece. The forged signatures, the falsified death certificate, the wire fraud logs, and the sworn affidavit from the doctor who had been duped into certifying my death. I could feel Leonard's eyes burning into me from across the room, but I didn't flinch. I'd been through worse than this. I'd survived wars. I'd survived being erased from my own family's history. This was just another battle. "Perhaps," Sylvia continued, "you would like to explain, Mr. Greaves, why these documents were filed under the belief that Rowan Greaves was dead, when in fact she was alive and well. How do you explain the fact that your signature is on every document, and that these actions were taken without her knowledge or consent?" Leonard's face went red. He opened his mouth to speak, but Sylvia wasn't done. "Perhaps," Sylvia added with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, "the judge would like to see the video." The room went silent as the monitor in front of the judge flickered to life. On the screen, Grandpa's face appeared, calm and steady. The same man who had always seen the best in me, who had trusted me to carry on his work. "Your Honor," Grandpa's voice said, "if you're watching this, it means they've tried to bury my granddaughter. But this isn't just about money or a business. This is about a legacy." The video was short but powerful. Grandpa spoke with conviction, explaining how he had made sure I would be the one to carry the torch. How Leonard had never earned the company, and how he had always planned to pass it on to me, despite what the rest of the family thought. I saw Leonard's jaw clench as the video ended. His face twisted in frustration. He hadn't expected this. He hadn't expected Grandpa's words to be so clear, so direct, and he hadn't expected me to come back, to fight. The judge turned her gaze from the screen back to Leonard. "What's your response to this?" she asked, her voice cold. Leonard stammered for a moment, but there was no getting out of this. The truth was there, in black and white, and the world was about to know it. After the video, Sylvia wasted no time. She handed over the binder filled with the forged documents, the bank logs, the wire fraud transfers. It was all there, every piece of evidence I needed to prove that Leonard had committed a series of crimes to take what wasn't his. The judge didn't take long to deliberate. Her decision was swift, cutting through the air like a sharp blade. "I find the evidence presented today to be credible and compelling. The fraudulent actions taken by Mr. Greaves and his associates have been exposed. The court recognizes Rowan Greaves as the sole legal heir to Marshall Greaves's estate and as the rightful controller of Braden Tech Systems. All transfers made under false authority are hereby frozen pending criminal investigation." I didn't flinch. I didn't smile. I just nodded, my heart pounding in my chest. This was it. The moment I'd been waiting for. Outside the courtroom, the press was already gathering. The reporters were swarming, but I ignored them. I didn't need their attention. I had everything I needed: control, power, and the truth. I walked out of the courthouse, my boots clicking against the stone. Behind me, I could hear the murmur of the crowd, the shuffle of papers, the flash of cameras. But none of it mattered anymore. I wasn't their daughter anymore. I wasn't their problem. I was finally free. The courthouse steps were slick with rain as I made my way out, each step echoing through the damp silence. The weight of the gavel's decision still hung in the air, like the tremors after an earthquake. My father, Leonard, was now officially a criminal in the eyes of the law, and I, by all accounts, was the rightful heir to everything. But it didn't feel like a victory. Not yet, maybe not ever. I walked briskly down the street, my jacket pulled tight against the wind, but it wasn't the cold that made my fingers tremble. It was the realization of what I had just done, and what I was about to do. My whole life, my family, my name, my past was tangled up in this moment. But now that I had control, I couldn't just walk away from it all. The fight had become more than about just inheritance. It was about reclaiming a life that had been stolen from me. Rebuilding, even. Behind me, the sounds of reporters shouting faded into the distance. They would want their stories, their headlines. But they didn't know the half of it. They didn't know the secrets. The betrayals. The real war was still ahead of me. And the moment I stepped into that courtroom, I knew I had only started to unravel the truth. That night, Sylvia and I sat in her cluttered office, the faint glow of the lamp casting long shadows over the papers scattered across her desk. The tension had settled, but it was still there, lingering in the silence. I wasn't sure what to say. There was too much. Too many emotions I wasn't sure I wanted to process. Sylvia was the first to break the silence. "All right, Rowan, you've got what you wanted. They're out. For now." She took a sip from her mug, her eyes never leaving mine. "But you know this doesn't end here." I nodded, not needing her to explain. "I know." She leaned back in her chair, studying me. "This is about more than just control of the company. That was just the start. The real game starts now." "I didn't come here for a game, Sylvia," I muttered, my voice tight with frustration. "I didn't come back for this." Her eyes softened. "I know. But your father, your sister, this whole damn family, they think they can play with people's lives. They think they can erase anyone they don't like, anyone who stands in their way. Well, they've got one hell of a surprise coming." I sat back in my chair, staring out the window. The night was quiet, but my mind was loud. What would be the right move now? What was I supposed to do with this newfound power, this inheritance that had cost me so much. Where do we go from here? I finally asked, my voice steady, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in it. What's the next step? Now, Sylvia said slowly. We make them regret every single thing they've done. You've got the proof of the fraud, the manipulation, the abuse. They can't deny it. But what we do with that, how we use it, that's the key. I met her eyes then, the weight of her words sinking in. She was right. I had to be strategic. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about justice. And if I wanted to claim what was mine, I had to play it smart. No more slipping back into the shadows. No more playing by their rules. I need to get into Braden Tech, I said suddenly, the idea forming like a spark in the back of my mind. I need access to the books, the shares, the accounts. I need to know exactly what they've done. Sylvia raised an eyebrow. You're going in alone? I hesitated. I wasn't sure I could trust anyone with this. Not completely. But I had to move quickly, before Leonard could make his next move. I've got Miles on it, I said. He's been tracking the money. He'll be able to get me the files I need. Good, Sylvia said. But don't underestimate how much they'll fight. Leonard will come at you with everything he has. He won't go down without a war. I didn't expect him to, I replied, my voice cold. But he's going to lose. This time, I'm the one who's playing. The next few days were a blur of meetings, phone calls, and back-channel dealings. Miles was digging through the financials of Braden Tech, analyzing every transaction, every wire transfer. Sylvia, in the meantime, was gathering all the legal firepower we could find to ensure that nothing Leonard did next could undo the court's ruling. I spent the time preparing myself for what was to come. I wasn't just taking over a company. I was stepping into a role that my father had built on deceit and manipulation. I had to do it my way. I had to be different. I couldn't shake the image of my mother's scarf. The woman in the street had been wearing it that day, the one who looked like her. I had walked past her, not stopping to ask questions. But I knew who she was. The ghost of my past had come to collect. Phoebe Winthrop. My stepmother. The name sent a chill down my spine. She had always been in the background, always too quiet, too neutral. But now, with everything that had happened, I knew I couldn't ignore her any longer. I needed answers. And Phoebe had them. The following morning, I drove to the address I had found in the archives, the one linked to Phoebe's old files. It was a small, modest house tucked away in a quiet neighborhood, far from the sprawling Greaves estate. The streets were empty, the sky gray and heavy with the threat of rain. I knocked on the door, the sound sharp in the stillness. A few moments passed before the door opened, revealing Phoebe standing in the doorway. She looked older than I remembered, thinner, her eyes shadowed with secrets I had yet to uncover. "What do you want, Rowan?" she asked, her voice guarded, though there was a flicker of something in her eyes, fear maybe. I stepped forward, not waiting for an invitation. "I need answers, Phoebe," I said. "I know you helped my father. I know you're part of this mess. And I'm done being lied to." Phoebe didn't speak at first. She just stood there, her gaze flicking over my shoulder to the empty street behind me, as if searching for a way out. "I didn't want this for you," she finally said, her voice cracking. "I never thought they would go this far." "What did you think, Phoebe?" I demanded, stepping closer. "You thought you could just pretend to be a part of this family? That you could play the part of the dutiful wife, and I wouldn't notice? You signed my name on a forged document. You're not innocent." Phoebe's face paled. She closed her eyes, taking a long breath before answering. "I did what I had to do. For my own survival. You don't understand, Rowan. Leonardy has ways of making people disappear. I didn't think he'd go this far either, but he did." I looked at her, disgust curling in my chest. "What did he promise you?" "Nothing," she whispered. "He said he just needed someone to help him clean up the mess, to cover his tracks. He said it was temporary, that you'd never even know. I didn't know they were going to take everything. I didn't know you were still alive. I stepped back, my mind racing. This was it. The piece of the puzzle I needed. Phoebe had been the one to sign off on the falsified death certificate. She had been complicit in this scheme, but now she was scared. And I knew deep down that she wasn't the real enemy. "You're done here," I said, turning to walk away. "But you're not getting away with this." "I never wanted to hurt you," Phoebe called after me. I didn't turn back. The rain came down harder as I left Phoebe's house, the droplets hitting my skin like cold needles. The encounter with her had only confirmed what I already suspected. She was more of a pawn in this whole twisted game than I had realized. But that didn't make her any less dangerous. In fact, it made her more so. She'd been manipulated by Leonard, yes, but she'd still willingly helped him erase me. That betrayal stung, but it was the type of sting that made you stronger. It was a reminder that nothing in this world was as it seemed. The people I thought I could trust, the family I had believed I would always be a part of, they weren't who they claimed to be. They were schemers, manipulators, willing to burn anything in their way for power. And now, I had the power. I pulled into my apartment garage, the dull thud of the engine cutting through the silence. The weight of what I had to do next loomed over me. Leonard had to be stopped. I didn't just want to reclaim what was rightfully mine. No. I was about to change the entire game. I wasn't going to let him get away with erasing my existence, my identity, or my legacy. This was no longer just about inheritance. This was about survival, about rebuilding everything they tried to tear down. I walked up the stairs to my apartment, my thoughts running wild. The flash drive, the videos, the evidence everything I had was coming together. But I needed one last piece to make sure this all ended the way it was meant to. I had to go after the heart of the empire, Braden Tech. Sylvia and I met later that night, as we had so many times before. She was sitting at her cluttered desk, surrounded by piles of paperwork, her face illuminated by the glow of the desk lamp. Her calm, collected demeanor had always been a source of strength, but even I could see the weight she was carrying. We were nearing the end game, and it wasn't going to be pretty. "I spoke with Miles," she said, her voice steady but with an edge of urgency. "We've got everything we need. The signature forgery, the wire fraud, the sale of your shares to the holding company, all of it. We have enough to bring Leonard down." I nodded, leaning against the desk, the weight of the moment pressing down on me. "But we need to hit him hard. Fast." Sylvia's gaze hardened. "No more waiting. We do this now. We bring everything to light before he has a chance to cover his tracks." She handed me a folder, thick with documents. "These are the finalized files. The motion for the injunction, the affidavits, the evidence. It's airtight. All you need to do is file it and watch the pieces fall into place." I felt my pulse quicken. This was it. No more hesitating. No more second-guessing. I had to take the reins. Once and for all. I took the folder from her, the heavy weight of it feeling like a reminder of everything I had fought for. "I'm ready,"